God. And of course we learn the Herodian dynasty kings were expected to practice Judaism, but instead they blasphemed God and his laws. So let's look at some of the evidence historically of Herod, where when he hears about, this, we're just going to look into the forms of blasphemy that actually takes place here with the first king, Herod the Great. This is in Matthew chapter 2, verses 7 to 13, and it says, "Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appears." This is him going against, to try and look for Jesus, to try and kill Jesus. "And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also." So again, Herod the Great is expected. People are going to see Herod as, he's part of the Judaism faith, so of course it makes sense that he's going to go and worship Jesus, but of course he's being deceptive, isn't he? And and it says here in the rest of the verse here, it says, "And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him." Blasphemy. Again, Herod was not pleased with Jesus' birth, which again is blasphemy, because we find that all of Jerusalem, they were disappointed as well. Herod saw Jesus as a threat. He should have been embracing Jesus, but he didn't. And he saw Jesus as a threat and wanted to destroy him, because Jesus is the truth. Herod did not want the truth to be revealed. This in itself is blasphemy, to deny the truth and accept a lie. Again, we're going to look at more evidence of blasphemy here. And this is another Herodian who was told by John the Baptist that he should not take another man's wife, as it goes against the laws of God. Again, switching right for wrong here. And it says here in Mark chapter 6, verse 17, "For Herod himself had sent forth and laid hold upon John, and bound him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her." Verse 18, "For John had said unto Herod, It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. Therefore Herodias had a quarrel against him, and would have killed him, and she could not." For verse 20, "For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just man and holy, and observed him, and when he heard him, he did many things, and heard him gladly." So again, what we've got here is that we've got Herod is not following the laws of God. He's marrying his brother's wife, because you've got to remember the people in Jerusalem are thinking, they're expecting these kings to be doing things, they know that they're not meant to be pagan kings. They're convinced that they're meant to be following the laws of God, but of course we find that they're not. They're in blasphemy. And this is the blasphemy, because it changes God's laws and word for a lie. He's just kind of doing whatever he wants. And I've got blasphemy in regards to Jesus. In Luke chapter 13, verse 31. And this is to do with... So the same day there came certain of the Pharisees, saying unto him, which is Jesus, Get thee out, and depart hence, for Herod will kill thee. Verse 32. And he, Jesus, said unto them, Go ye and tell that fox, Behold, I cast out devils, and I do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. So again, you can see that they really are going against Judaism, and they really are following the Roman religion, really, that which we eventually find out because of the Roman god Apollo, and also the Roman god, which would be Jupiter, which is another form of Satan. Because they were following after that instead of Judaism, they're blaspheming. We've got here blasphemy in regards to the church. So Acts chapter 12, verse 1, and it says here, "And it was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. Because of these previous blasphemies by the Herodian kings, we also know that the Antichrist, which is the seventh king, will also speak blasphemies against God also." So we've got the old 6 kings that are dead and gone of our time, of course. But of course, when you go back to John's time, there's still a king, and of course they had the other 5 kings that had fallen. And we know that the other rulers, because there was so many other rulers, they didn't have the title of king, so you only have 6 in total. So it makes perfect sense. So Daniel 7, which is the 7th king, and Daniel 11 confirms this, as we're just going to read here, as the next blasphemer. So it says here, in Daniel 7, verse 25, "And he, which is a little horn, Antichrist, shall speak great words against the Most High." Blasphemy. Daniel 11, verse 36, "And the king, Antichrist, shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods." Again, more evidence of blasphemy. So the character of the Antichrist is someone who is going to blaspheme the Lord God, and he does this by deliberately changing that which is good into a lie. Right becomes wrong, and wrong becomes right. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so convinced that he's going to get into the temple of God, because the people, because they're now thinking about trying to build the third temple, and they want to go back to the practices of Judaism of slaughtering a lamb. I believe that the Antichrist, they're going to know where his roots are, and he's maybe going to say that I'm from this bloodline, and then they're going to let him in the temple of God because they know of his Judaism background, and then he will go against them, and then he will bring in abominations of desolations. So it's very, very deceptive. It's what's going on, because in reality he's really doing what his ancestors have done. So moving on, blasphemy. It now makes sense why the heads, or the kings, as well as the mountains of Jerusalem, of the beast is written blasphemy. Makes perfect sense now what's going on here. What we're going to read now is we're going to read about Revelations 12. This is going to help us to, this definitely shows us even more evidence that the Antichrist definitely has to come from the Herodian dynasty kings. So we're just going to read that now. It says here, this is to do with the Herodian kings are going against Jesus and his disciples. It says here, so this is a reference to a time before the birth of Jesus and after his birth. So it says here, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman," which I'm convinced is definitely has to be talking about Mary, but when we get through the rest of the scriptures, we'll realize that this has to be talking about Mary. "And she is clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." And of course, I'm convinced that because of the rest of the scriptures, the 12 stars have to represent the future disciples of Jesus. It will make sense when we get further on this. Verse 2, and it says here, "And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered." And of course, this has to be regarding the birth of Jesus. And we're just going to go to verse 3. "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, which is symbolic of Satan, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So these are the 7 heads, which is the 7 kings, "and 7 crowns upon his heads." So the crowns would be the Herodian dynasty kings. Because it's kind of funny how this is done, because it's like it talks about the past, but it also talks about the future. It's like it's almost like they're connecting the Antichrist, showing us where his roots come from in this passage here. So we're going to read here in verse 4. "And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." And of course, we learn here, when we go back to Matthew chapter 2, King Herod the first, which is the first king, is with Satan, the dragon, and they, of course, because of him being connected to Rome, because Rome was controlling the Herodian kings, you see. So they would have control over Jerusalem. Tried to kill Jesus after Jesus' birth. So Herod the Great is working with a dragon to try and kill Jesus, which we learned about in Matthew 2, when the angel says, take your child and your mother and flee, because Herod wants to kill, Jesus. That's what we learned here. We're going to look next is verse 5, and it says here, and she brought forth a man-child, Jesus, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And of course, what we learn is that when you go to Revelation chapter 19, verse 15, we actually learn that Jesus actually rules the nations, his world nations here, with a rod of iron. And of course, we come here and we realize a man-child is also ruling the nations with a rod of iron as well. And of course, we know that Jesus went up to God's throne after resurrection, which we find in Acts chapter 1, verse 9 to 11. So then it starts to make sense what's going on here. This is them going. And of course, Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, and it says here, it reads, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So of course, the seed symbolism here in this context here is that religion is at the top, and it's to do with Judaism. It's to do with the faith of Jesus Christ, and of course, the remnant of her seed will be the 12 disciples, which is the 12 stars, and of course, they're responsible for why there's Christians around the world now. And of course, what we learn also, that when he's going at war with the remnant of her seed, we actually find that the Romans, with Satan, had martyred those. For example, the Christians who were sent to the lions by the Romans is a very good example of this. So it starts to make sense why the scriptures would have to be talking this way back then. It's just Satan with Rome going against the remnant of the woman's seed, because if it hadn't been for her, then we would never have had the testimony of Jesus Christ in the first place. Now, because of this evidence here, I'm convinced that the Antichrist ancestors are the Herodian dynasty kings. And, just because of what we've looked at, we're actually going to look into this in our next slide. So what we're going to now look at is that we're going to look at the Daniel 11, where it speaks about him being connected to the God of his fathers. It says here, where it's God of his fathers is a term that can be used for pagan kings because of their ancestors originally were connected to Judaism. So we're going to actually look into 2 Kings chapter 21. And it says here, Ammon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned